Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today's conversation is especially important for anyone preparing for SQL interviews in the US tech job market. Instead of focusing on definitions or syntax, we're going to talk honestly about the real mistakes candidates make during SQL interviews. Joining me today is Navneet Kaur, a senior data analyst who has interviewed candidates across multiple companies and roles. Navneet, thanks for being here and sharing your experience with us.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm really happy to be part of this conversation because I've seen so many capable candidates struggle in interviews. Not because they lack SQL knowledge, but because they approach interviews the wrong way. These mistakes are very common, especially in US-based interviews, where communication, reasoning, and real-world thinking matter just as much as technical accuracy.
Let's start with the big picture. From your experience interviewing candidates in real hiring situations, what would you say is the single most common mistake people make when they walk into an SQL interview, regardless of whether they're early in their career or already have a few years of experience?
The biggest mistake is treating the interview like a test where they just need to write a correct query. In reality, interviewers are looking for how candidates think. Many people memorize SQL patterns without understanding why they work, and that becomes obvious as soon as the interviewer asks follow-up questions or slightly changes the problem.
That makes sense. In US interviews especially, communication is a big deal. How much does poor explanation or weak communication hurt a candidate, even if their SQL query technically produces the correct result?
Poor communication hurts a lot more than candidates realize. Interviewers want to hear your reasoning, assumptions, and trade-offs. If you can't clearly explain why you chose a particular approach, it raises concerns about how you'll work on a team, explain decisions, or collaborate with product managers and engineers in real situations.
I've noticed many candidates start typing queries immediately. Is rushing into writing SQL without fully understanding the problem a common issue in interviews?
Yes, it's extremely common. Candidates often skip clarifying questions and miss important details like how to handle duplicates, null values, or time ranges. In US-style interviews, interviewers actually expect candidates to pause, ask questions, and confirm requirements before writing any SQL, because that mirrors real workplace behavior.
Joins are something interviewers love to ask about. What kinds of mistakes do candidates typically make when dealing with joins during SQL interviews?
Join mistakes come up all the time. Candidates often default to inner join without thinking about whether missing data matters. They also misunderstand join conditions, which can lead to duplicated rows or incorrect results. These issues tell interviewers that the candidate doesn't fully understand relational data, which is a core skill.
Group by questions also trip people up. Why do so many candidates struggle with grouping and aggregation during interviews?
A lot of candidates rely on trial and error instead of understanding how group by actually works. They include columns incorrectly, misunderstand aggregation rules, or rely on database-specific behavior. In interviews, especially in analytics or data roles, this signals weak fundamentals and limited real-world reporting experience.
Performance is a big concern in real systems. Do candidates generally ignore performance considerations during SQL interviews?
Yes, very often. Many candidates focus only on getting the right output and never mention performance. In US interviews, especially for mid-level roles, interviewers expect candidates to at least acknowledge indexing, query efficiency, or scalability, even if they don't go deep into optimization.
Indexes are often mentioned casually. What mistakes do candidates make when talking about indexes?
Most candidates repeat that indexes improve performance, but can't explain trade-offs. They don't mention how indexes impact inserts or updates, or when indexes might not help. Interviewers can quickly tell whether someone has worked with real data volumes or just learned definitions from tutorials.
Null handling seems basic, but it causes problems. Why is null such a tricky area in SQL interviews?
Null exposes gaps in understanding very quickly. Candidates misuse equality checks, misunderstand how null affects aggregates, or ignore edge cases entirely. In real systems, these mistakes cause bugs, So, interviewers see poor null handling as a sign that the candidate may struggle in production environments.
Subqueries come up a lot. What are the most common mistakes candidates make with subqueries?
Candidates often either overuse subqueries or avoid them completely. Many can't explain when a correlated subquery is appropriate or when a join would be simpler and faster. This shows a lack of experience thinking about query structure and execution flow, which is important in real applications.
How do candidates usually perform when interviewers move away from textbook questions and ask real world business scenarios?
That's where many candidates struggle the most. They're comfortable answering direct questions, but when asked to design a query for a report or dashboard, they freeze. This shows they haven't practiced applying SQL to business problems, which is exactly what U.S. companies care about.
Communication and collaboration matter a lot in U.S. workplaces. How does poor communication affect SQL interview outcomes?
Poor communication makes interviewers nervous, even if the candidate is technically strong. If someone can't explain assumptions, clarify requirements, or talk through decisions, it raises concerns about teamwork. SQL interviews are often a proxy for how well someone communicates technical ideas on the job.
Do candidates often ignore database design concepts like normalization and constraints?
Yes, very often. Many candidates think SQL is just about writing select queries. They don't talk about constraints, normalization, or data integrity, which are critical in real systems. Interviewers expect candidates to understand databases as systems, not just query engines.
Transactions and ACID properties are fundamentals. Why do candidates struggle to explain them clearly?
Many candidates memorize the ACID acronym but don't understand how transactions behave in real failure scenarios. They can't explain rollbacks, partial failures, or concurrency issues. In interviews, this signals that they haven't worked much with production databases where data safety matters.
Delete, truncate, and drop questions are common. What mistakes do candidates make here?
Candidates often know surface-level differences but don't understand real consequences. They forget about logging, rollback behavior, or permissions. Interviewers want to see that candidates think carefully about destructive operations, especially in environments where data loss is a serious risk.
How does lack of hands-on experience show up during SQL interviews?
It becomes obvious through vague answers and difficulty handling follow-up questions. Candidates without real experience struggle with edge cases, performance trade-offs, and realistic assumptions. Hands-on experience naturally shows through confidence and practical reasoning, which interviewers notice quickly.
Do candidates sometimes hurt themselves by being too confident or not confident enough?
Absolutely. Overconfident candidates argue instead of listening, while underconfident candidates doubt themselves unnecessarily. Interviewers look for balanced confidence, openness to feedback, and clear reasoning, not arrogance or insecurity.
Interviewers often expect candidates to ask clarifying questions. Why is failing to do that considered a mistake?
Not asking questions makes candidates seem passive. Interviewers expect questions about data size, business rules, or expected output. Asking thoughtful questions shows engagement and real-world thinking, which is highly valued in US-based interviews.
Finally, what's your biggest piece of advice for candidates who want to avoid these SQL interview mistakes?
My biggest advice is to shift your mindset. Don't focus on memorizing queries. Focus on understanding data, explaining your thinking, and solving problems step by step. Practice talking through your logic out loud, because interviews are conversations, not exams.
This has been a really valuable and honest conversation, Navneet. Thanks for sharing insights that candidates don't usually hear, but truly need to succeed.
Thanks, Ryan. I really hope this helps candidates feel more prepared and confident going into SQL interviews, especially in competitive job markets.
And thanks to everyone watching. If this was helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone preparing for SQL interviews. We'll see you next time.